Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. I'm excited to welcome my guest today, Amit Pandhi, to the show. He is the CEO of Velocity Snack Brands, which may not be a household name, but maybe you heard of Popchips. And they are a data and digital-driven, better-for-you snacking platform with a portfolio of iconic brands in the salty snacks, sweets, and nutrition bar category, like Popchips I just mentioned. And prior to joining VSB, Pandhi served as the president and CEO of Arctic Zero, a low-calorie ice cream, bootstrapping the brand from inception to over 18,000 doors. And prior to becoming an operator, he was a member of the founding team of the private equity firm HGGC. Currently serves as a board member on Naturally Network, Dang Foods. What's Dang Foods? Tell me about that. And Bright Foods. And I'm excited to share his story and unlock my lifetime supply of Popchips. Let's get to it. Amit, welcome to the show, my man. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
My first question is, I didn't get, and one of the perks about being a host is I usually get samples, and I don't see my box of Popchips here. Who do I talk to about this?
I know some people. I can let me have some people send you some stuff, but you can find it in most grocery stores, as you probably know.
I'll support the cause there, but it's interesting too because I worked early in my career. I remember when we had our first conversation. I was telling you my first job was at a little company called Vitamin Water, and I was like drowning in it. Like, you have so much of it. Like, isn't that the thing working in the CPG space or in the food space? You're always just samples and trying and everything. Like, how do you manage?
Well, you can't see it here, but in my office, my whole desk on this side is covered with samples. The floor is covered with samples. It's you gotta love what you do, right? You gotta love the food. You gotta love the industry, and a lot of it is just sharing with other brands, other fans, and people who are passionate. So I love it. It's like Christmas morning every day that I get a box from a brand or from our plant or our innovation team on what we're working on next. So I love getting those products.
You never know what you're going to get. So let's back it up a little bit. The podcast is about, career journeys, and we love to dissect and unpack how someone gets to the point of the career where you're at here. So let's talk a little bit about Arctic Zero. But before we even do that, right, going back to the early days, like, was there always is food a passion of yours? Was it a category? Like, how was this a chosen path for you?
I never thought I would be a food and bev guy. Like, I grew up pretty poor, blue collar, and food wasn't something other than just fuel, like just something to eat. It wasn't something I really focused on brands. I wasn't focused on. It was always like, let's buy the cheapest thing that you can afford, and it's one of those things that I sort of grew up around the grocery stores. My mom worked in a grocery store. I bagged for a little while, and so I've always just been curious about it, and I frankly have sort of been an entrepreneur my whole life. From when I was little, I was always trying to make deals and always trying to sell stuff that I had, and so for me, kind of becoming an entrepreneur was always a lifelong journey.
And was there that early, were you like, did you have a newspaper around? I mean, you mentioned bagging groceries, but what was that first entrepreneur? Like, what was the first thing you sold kind of on your own?
So my parents had a small card and gift store. And so I often worked there as a kid. afternoons, weekends. And so, I've sort of sold a lot of stuff at their place. But I would say that even when I was younger, I found ways to sell stuff. Like when I was in third grade, and our teacher had us set up like little booths to sell stuff. I went and bought like all the pencils from this one guy and bought all the pads from this other guy, and then like I upsold it right to everyone.
Margins, baby.
I used to collect cans and found a way to capitalize on that. Where each can, you'd go to the little box at the grocery store and you put the cans in, you get a nickel out. And I found out like my friends like Skittles, so I would like pay them for the cans in individual Skittles. I sold car wash tickets and then washed cars on the weekends.
Always a hustler.
Yeah, I feel like I've always worked hard. I think most people, I'm comfortable saying I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, but I've always been willing to just work harder than anybody.
That's what it's about, man. It's about putting in the work, and hard work will beat talent any day of the week, especially lazy talent there. So let's fast forward. Your first company, Arctic Zero, which was a low calorie, lactose free frozen snack brand, you self-funded it with your partners. How did your team bootstrap Arctic Zero into a profitable company? Can you give us a little bit of the insight?
Yeah, we just didn't pay anybody for 3 years.
That's one way to do it, folks. And there's your key takeaway here on the podcast today. Just don't pay anyone and you will be profitable. Money in, no money out. Okay, got it.
Basically, part of it is you have to have good margins. And I spend a lot of my time talking to anybody I can that margins are the entire game. And if you can have great margins, then when you sell a product, you can return more than the value of the cost of that product. And if you're willing to, sacrifice and live out of a garage and like just really bootstrap, you can make a lot of things happen. But we really just focused on executing perfectly, and we made sure that we made money on every unit, which I think a lot of brands are so focused on gaining distribution these days, and they don't focus at all on profitability or on margins, or like it might work in the short term, but inevitably it's not sustainable.
So let's pause on that for a moment. So you're saying if the new product is coming to market, really focus on obviously the quality of the product. That's first and foremost.
It has to taste, at least in food, it has to taste good, right?
But let's figure out that margin first. But correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes greater margins are found by scaling, and that's where you're finding the efficiencies, right? Like from a production, from a supply chain standpoint, especially in the food and bev category.
Of course, but I think that everyone believes that they can grow. If you lose money on the first unit and you sell 1 million units at that same margin, you're going to lose 1 million times whatever you lost on that first unit. And exactly. I think people don't. I think part of creating the right product at the beginning is making sure that you've mapped the path to scale, right? So you want to make sure that you have the margins on that initial run, and then as you grow, you're able to increase those margins. Whereas I think I've seen so many brands where the margins are in the teens, and it's just not sustainable. You can't pay to support your product on the shelf, and you can't pay to acquire the right talent and to sustain the business.
So well said. So after bootstrapping Arctic and resisting outside capital for so long, what was how'd you punch out?
It was just one of those things where I was ready for my next opportunity, and I thought about going to start another business. I thought about going to a small startup again and scaling it. But being able to partner with VMG, the premier private equity firm in the space, and to build a better for you platform. I think there are so many incredible brands in the space, but not all of them need an entire marketing organization. They don't all need a finance and accounting department. There's
economies of scale.
Right. They don't all need all of that back end infrastructure. And so we thought, let's buy, an iconic brand. Let's buy the first better for you snack brand, which was Popchips, right? Which was, before every chip was fried. and Popchips sort of changed the game in better for you. And use that as a platform, use their distribution network as we go to scale this platform. So we acquired this business in October 2019, and worked to improve the margins, right? That's the name of the game, to make sure we had redundancy. Obviously the pandemic hit, and so things just changed. Everyone was focused on, supplying their customers and doing what needed to be done. And now as we start to come out of that, the goal is to acquire 7 to 10 other businesses, brands in the space, in both salty snacks, sweets and confectionery, so candy and cookies, and nutrition bars, and really build an entire platform of better for you products.
I love it.
Yeah.
And how did the acquisition of Popchips come about? What was that strategy?
It really was one of those, like, we want something that's got a national footprint, that's got very high household awareness, right? 89% of people know what Popchips is. Just so you know, household penetration of even toilet paper is only 96%. I don't know who the other 4% are.
Yeah, seriously. They're out in the booty somewhere.
But
organic.
But Popchips was sort of the perfect brand in that it had the distribution, it had the awareness, it had the ability to scale beyond itself.
And there's such a value to that, to brand recognition. When you think about from an acquisition standpoint, especially in maybe a legacy brand and reinventing that. But what did you learn from that acquisition? Was there a misstep along the way? Was there a key learning from that acquisition that you've taken forward with you every day in business?
I mean, I think part of what we learn every day is it's very different when a brand is a solo brand and the systems and infrastructure that have been put in place for a single brand. When you're trying to convert that into a platform play, there's just so many more systems and processes and automation that you have to put into place so that you do get those economies of scale and you can scale that business. So it was a complete reshift of everything that was here. We changed everything.
Yeah. And how have sales been since the acquisition?
I mean, I think it's obviously mixed, right? Like, obviously with the pandemic happening, food service, schools, there's a lot of areas that were affected.
Schools are a big market. Schools and food service.
Yes.
Individual, like the non-retail, the wholesale packages.
Yes. But obviously on the other side, retail was very strong, right? As people shifted.
People are home. They're not going out. They need to have their snacks at home. They're not going to the store.
Exactly. So that side of the business has been strong. So it's a mix. My expectation is that as the world reopens, it'll stack. So the gains that we made in retail will hold, and then airports, food service, people going back to their offices, people buying at bodegas, all that business we're expecting to return.
Interesting. What's your favorite snack in the entire portfolio?
We've recently launched a couple of new things, and we've launched this age white cheddar Popchips, and it is incredible. And it's crazy to me. Popchips have been around for such a long time, but there was no cheddar flavor, which is frankly the number 2 flavor in the category behind salt, and it is unbelievable. And then also one of our new pieces of innovation is we've launched a better for you corn chip. So and it's not fried, which is baked? Pretty rare. No, it's air popped, which is sort of what makes Popchips famous. But people are used to eating these Fritos, and with this product, it's like 4 times as much volume. And it's so much less fat. I think it's a quarter of the fat. It's just an incredible product.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah. We'll get you some, Adam. We'll get you some.
I appreciate it. I know a guy. Are there any industries outside of snack foods, maybe even CPG in general, that you personally feel you'd like to get involved with?
So I think, I just love the entire space, right? I think food and bev in general, it's just where I've sort of stayed, and I work with a number of brands, but I think, I think they're very different. Like, I think beverages are just a completely different animal. It's just a lot of, from vitamin water, right? Like it's a lot of just DSDs. It's just very different, than food. But it's all, at the end of the day, all of it is dependent on, can you get the right consumer? Can you get the right velocities and the pull through, right? You have to have the right product first and foremost. And then everything else sort of comes together.
I want to go back a little bit, and you and I have talked offline about this, working with your passion for startups and advising them, and very serious standpoint on the dangers of taking funding from any outside sources, especially before that 5 million mark. If you could unpack that a little bit and give some advice to some founders, some people looking to enter this space, why that is so critical, because, a lot of them, they have friends and family around, and they need that cash, but why should they do everything they can to resist?
I think people people think that raising money is, you see it in the news, right? It's like, oh, this brand raised 5 million, this brand raised 500,000, this brand raised 800 million. And everyone seems to think that the fundraisers are the end game. But in my opinion, the fundraiser is the beginning, right? And now you have a responsibility to your investors. They've also taken a great piece of the upside.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the part that people don't pay attention to, right? They don't understand preferences and liquidation preferences and preferred and participating preferred and just ways that they might lose out. I think also getting that cash early makes people spend money.
I was about to say, it's a false safety
for
net.
Lack of margin. It makes them compensate, right? Like you spend ahead of your means, and then sometimes it's just, then you get into this cycle. And I think that's the other side of fundraising is, once you start fundraising, I believe you are now in the fundraising game. You're not in the CPG game, right?
So you're losing focus on that product and the customer.
Exactly. So all you're focusing on is the next raise, the raise after that, the raise after that, versus let me get the right products. Let me figure out who my consumers are. Let me start selling it to them. Let me make all the improvements I need to do. Let me start scaling the business. And then I don't get quite as much dilution. I don't have to go through 7 or 8 or 10 rounds and end up with a very small piece of the business. And also you lose control. You lose control of what you want to do.
It's not worth, but it's a tough game, because especially in the food, beverage, or anytime you're developing a physical product, especially a food, there's costs, and you need money for R&D, production, scaling, sourcing.
Correct.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Well, I mean, I think it always, no one's going to give you money just for an idea. I mean, well, that's not true. Sometimes you can get money for just an idea. But most of the time, what I've seen in the space is the founders put up some money to start the product, right? And I think especially in this e-com world, right? Especially during pandemic and post-pandemic, it is a lot easier to get your products out than it used to be. You used to have to pay slotting, work with retailers, give them free product, pay a lot of money to get it out there. Now, these algorithms for social media platforms allow you to find the right consumer and allow you to get that trial, get them to start buying that product from you. So I think a lot of new brands can be built with a lot less capital than they could have in the past.
Hey Tribe, quick break in the action to introduce you to one of my close podcast friends, Hala Taha, and her show, The Young and Profiting Podcast. She interviews the brightest minds in the world, like former spies on how to gain influence, billionaires on biohacking your body, and even celebrities like Matthew McConaughey on what it's really like behind the scenes. At Yap, they go deep. There's no fluff on this podcast, and Hala asks all the right questions. You can listen at youngandprofiting.com or search for Young and Profiting on Apple, Spotify, CastBox, or your favorite podcast app. Now, back to the action on the podcast. So what's the plan? Like, let's riff on that for a moment there. You know, reintroducing Popchips, legacy brand. It's been there a while. What's the plan to utilize social media to get it in front of more folks from a brand awareness standpoint to ultimately drive them to purchase?
Well, I would say like that's one of those areas that we've spent this last 18 months really improving, right? We didn't have our own .com until very recently, right?
There was no popchips.com.
There was a popchips.com, but you couldn't buy any product from it.
Right. It wasn't a DTC site. It was just informational.
Exactly. Right. And then we would route people just to Amazon, right? Which is what a lot of brands do. I think that not being in, there's so many platforms now, right? There's Thrive Market, there's Hungry Root. There's so many ways of getting your products through e-com out to consumers that a lot of these brands are now just being built D2C, right? I think Nut Pods is an incredible example.
Super
I don't
Coffee.
know if you know that.
Well, Super Coffee's in retail also. That's not a good example.
Nut Pods, which is a non-dairy creamer, they built that entire business before it went into retail as a D2C brand, and that's not a brand you would normally think of. Like, hey, I'm going to get my alt creamers online.
Yeah, you never think of that, but they use social media to get in front of your face, and they talk about all the positive attributes.
And they've done an incredible job, and I think that's the future way of making sure that you build the following, and then when you get into retail, you can bring that following to retail.
Yeah, let's talk about 2021. We have so many health. I feel like are there any real good junk food brands coming out? Like I occasionally see it, like when I go to CVS or something, I'll see a candy bar or something. I'll be like, but it's two old bars coming together. They're collaborations. Like I'll see an M&M's and like some crazy chocolate bar come together, collaborations. But like, are there any new like good junk food? Like we don't give a shit about the sugar, the health. This is just going to be some crazy, guilt, ridden snack. Like are people still making like unhealthy snacks, or is it all just healthy?
I mean, I think you've got your traditional, CPGs cranking out plenty of that stuff. But I think, consumers are getting smarter about things, right? And even if I want my junk food, I'm going to eat it either A, in moderation, or B, I still want it to have some benefits, right? And I think an easy way of saying that is people used to have all these milk chocolate bars. Now dark chocolate's a little healthier. Okay, now I want something replaced with a little less sugar, or I want a little more functional, right? And I think you've seen that as confectionery has kind of declined a little bit, and people have moved towards nutrition bars, which I think are a pretty good substitute with some real benefits. What's
your guilty pleasure candy or snack?
Oh man, I have a sweet tooth. Me too, man. I love the junk. I've been snacking on.
What's your go-to?
I've been eating all my kids' Cadbury eggs every Easter.
I knew. Wait, let's riff on this. I knew you and I were connected for a reason. Once a year, and I don't go for the Halloween eggs. I don't do the Reese's eggs.
No way.
The beginning, when I see that first egg of the season, it's usually around February. It's right after Valentine's Day. They clear the Valentines, and then the eggs are right there. Here's a question: room temperature or from the fridge, and why? And why?
A little warmer than room temperature. I want it melty, like when it just melts and ooey in your mouth. I've never frozen it or from the fridge.
I'm okay with the fridge, but I'm with you on the meltiness. That's part of the experience because it's like an egg that you're eating the gross yolk out of, but it's sugary, whatever that is. And here's the thing. The challenge of taking the wrapper off, that's a real skill on the Cadbury egg. I think they do it on purpose where there's certain pieces that just automatically stick to the frickin'... You know exactly what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm saying here. And your hands are covered.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And you don't want somebody watching you. You never want somebody... It's not like I'm eating a nice steak dinner here. Like, it's a gross eating activity, a Cadbury egg.
I agree.
And I kind of feel like a little animal, too, when I get it. I'm like, no one's looking. And I'm like... And I was like... It's terrible. So we digress here on the podcast, but this is what it's all about here.
I think it's
it's an experience. It's experiential.
It's an experience, and I also think that people still are going to indulge, right?
They put 1 million of them on the end cap of this freaking CVS. Wait, quick funny story. This is probably 3 weeks ago. CVS right here around my office. I had to get something, and I had this shopping cart, and the wheel was kind of messed up, and I was like looking down at the wheel, and I wasn't looking, and I knocked into the end cap of the Cadbury eggs. I swear to God, it was like 1,000 eggs just flew on. I'm like, I want to be a good person. I want to pick them up, and then the CVS guy came over, and I helped them. He's like, you don't have to. I'm like, I'm gonna help you. I knocked it over. I'm not a dick, and then like as he's doing it, I start eating them. No, I didn't do that, right? Like, don't worry, I'll clean them up.
Were you like one in the cart, one on the shelf? One in the
for
cart,
you, one for me.
Exactly.
I was like a chipmunk with Cadbury eggs in there, but I digress here. But there's that experience, and I think that's what consumers relate to. There's certain nostalgia with certain foods. There's certain occasion-based eating. I mean, look at the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl fuels this. I would guess at least 50% of all chips and salsas are sold during the Super Bowl and football playoffs. Is that a fair stat?
It's a huge season. So to be fair, yes, February is huge snacking season. Super Bowl is a season, right? You go to the grocery store, there are end caps, there's displays, there's everything, right? Yes,
it's all done up there. So what, like, when you're looking at a brand to acquire, what are some of those key attributes aside from the financials? Let's put the financials aside. I ain't into that nerd finance money talk right now. But from a brand perspective, what are you looking for? What are those check marks?
It has to serve a need. It has to have an emotional connectivity to consumers, right? We don't want something that's just a me too. We want something that's a little special, something that serves a purpose, that's functional. But I'm going to be honest, it's got to have those margins. It's got to have those margins, or there's got to be a path for us to find a way for it to, maybe we can produce it in our facility, right, for a better cost than they have, or we can source it, things like nice. That. But yeah, it's got to make sense from a margin perspective. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
What advice would you give for anybody who's looking to get into this industry?
That's a good question. I think you got to move fast. You got to break things, and you got to be fiercely defiant of the status quo. I think that's the only way. I think 1 million people are going to tell you, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. It's been done this way or that, but I think you got to make your own path at some point.
And that's great. And that's great advice for almost anything. Right. I mean, that's just solid advice. How involved are you in the hiring process in your company?
I'm exceptionally involved. I interview every person I get some time with. I think it's really important. I sort of have a couple of philosophies on hiring, and the first is, if I can do your job better than you, you shouldn't work for me. I shouldn't be able to do anyone's job. And then, I also like to make sure that they understand all the issues of what they're coming into, right? I never try and trick anyone to come and work for me and say, this is all roses and puppies and rainbows, right? It's like,
warts and all.
Here's the issues that you're going to be facing in your job. Here's what we're expecting you to fix, and here's what you're expecting you to improve. I'm also brutally honest. I think some people are beat around the bush. I just give it to people straight up, right? So I always say, like, from me, in terms of feedback, I pull no punches. But
radical candor.
But then I'll get in the trench with them and fix the problem, and then we put it behind them.
It's good leadership. What do you have, like, a go-to interview question?
I have a few.
Well, let me take that back a step. By the time someone gets to you, their skills for the most part are assessed through the line. So assuming when someone gets to you, you're really looking for the culture. You're looking for that vibe and character. What is a go-to question that you have? Because it's hard in 30, 45 minutes, an hour even, to try to ascertain someone's character if they're good enough at a level to join your organization. I mean, what is that? What are those lines of questions to get to that?
So I'll tell you, what I'm looking for is resourcefulness. Number one skill set, resourcefulness. Will you figure out how to solve these problems that we're facing? Figure it by going over, under, around, Are you curious? Are you mentally curious about improving, right? Again, we do not accept complacency. I do not accept the status quo. I don't accept negligence. And are you willing to speak up? So what I try and do is find smart people who will disagree with me. And so I have a method that we implement basically in every organization that I've been a part of. So I call it the ambush. So if you have a good idea and your supervisor won't listen to you, your job is to convince 3 other people that you're right and they're wrong, and then those 4 people are supposed to ambush you. And you know that if 4 people are sticking their necks out, you're required to listen to them. And I've had my mind changed. I think every single person who's been in an ambush has had their mind changed. It doesn't necessarily mean everything gets changed, right? But at least, because sometimes the original idea was half-baked. It was an idea.
Right.
They hadn't talked to other departments. But by the time it flushes out the real topic. But I would say that 8 out of 10 times it makes an impact and it creates change, which is really what I'm looking for.
I absolutely love that approach. What's a deal breaker for you in an interview?
I think people who just want to stay in their lanes, put their head down and not, at least, for some really big CPG companies, you want people who are just doing their job and not sort of looking outside of their zone, right?
Right. There's individual contributors, right? There's certain roles that are, your finance guy, you don't need him twiddling around in production. Well, I shouldn't say that because maybe he has an idea based on financial perspective. That's different.
And so I always look for people who are smart, mentally curious, and willing to speak up and impact change, right? So if all you want to do is sit back, do your job, and not really say anything or be involved with things, like that's not going to work, right? I also one of the things that I will not accept is people who will not be accountable and responsible for the mistakes that they make, right? I don't care if you make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes, but do not push those things under the rug, right? You gotta be honest about when I screw up. We do all hands meetings. I'm like, guys, that was my call. I blew it. I screwed up. I'm sorry. I created like 50 hours of extra work for this team or this team, and I'm really sorry about it. I'll try not to let it happen again.
And those are strong leadership traits. But let me ask you a question. What is one of the biggest mistakes you made early on as you've climbed the corporate ladder into a true leadership, top of the top? What's one of those really tough lessons that you had to learn the hard way?
I would say that the toughest mistake I made in the past was hiring based off of resume and not based off of what's the word?
Like actual
attitude, right? Like just thinking someone can do all of the things based on their resume.
They don't tell the whole story.
It doesn't tell the whole story, right? No, and I will absolutely take someone who is willing to do any job over someone who is purely quote unquote strategic.
Love it.
I want doers, right? I want people. I think I hire like player coaches. I think that's really important. If all you want to do is be a coach, it won't usually work out in any of my organizations because I think people get too far removed from where the problems really are, right? You have to do the work. The world is changing so fast. If you just think the knowledge you had 20 years ago is still useful, it's really not anymore.
Yeah, let's quickly touch on the pandemic. How have you kept? I assume everybody has gone remote for the most part, like inside of production facilities, and you're handling that. But how have you kept the energy and culture alive? With everyone being remote.
So this is where I told my team I was completely wrong. I was an office guy. I like my whole career was like everyone's got to be in the office. That's where the magic is. That's where ideas, float around. It's where all the magic is, right? And the pandemic has shown me that that's not true, right? Of course, production is production, right? You got to run a plant. That the people in there have to be, on the line. We do what we can to, help them, minimize risk for them. But I would say from an office perspective, we do a couple of things. One is we do very regular all hands meetings. When the pandemic started, it was no one knew what was going on, and so they were nearly daily. And then now they're still 3 days a week. And what we do is we let people share. So we have some that's free flowing where I lead a discussion. Right. We have different department heads talk about what's going on, wins and losses. But then also we have each person go and present about themselves. And it can be anything they want. It can be a hobby. It can be their life story. They can do it in any format.
Like a book report?
Basically about themselves. Yeah. And it's been amazing. Like some people
learning stuff about people that you didn't know. That's how you bring them together.
And what I said when we started this was, I think it would have taken me years to learn about each person just through water cooler talk, right?
It's fascinating stuff you learn.
But we've got a guy who's in a dance crew and he's showing us his videos, and it's he is unbelievable. We had someone put together a video, and it was amazing. And we have some traditional CPG people and I did this too, where I just did a PowerPoint presentation, right? And some people just talked it out, but it was a really good way. You now know who your dog people are. You know who your cat people are.
The kids people are.
100%. And it was a way of bringing people together. My team, my team is a little different than I think most companies where you slowly add people over time, right? We came in, started VSB, and we hired a bunch of people who had never worked together. And how do you get them to communicate and connect? And that really went a long way versus letting people stay in their silos. It really went a long way. And we play games too. Like we've done Jeopardy. We've done a bunch of other things to keep it try and keep it social. We do Friday happy hours, which have slowed down a little bit, but you got to find ways of getting people to connect with each other.
That's awesome, and I appreciate you sharing that. So let's bring it home here. And I love asking this question, especially to accomplished senior level executives like yourself, Amit. What is the single greatest piece of advice you've ever received that you take action on every single day of your life?
Whew, that's a great question.
And it's my master class because I ask everybody this, and I compile it. And that's my master's degree. Now it's almost PhD level at this point.
I would say that no job is beneath any of us. I'll do any job. I'll wipe counters. I'll clean, I'll take out the trash if it needs to be done. We're all rowing in the boat together. So all efforts help. And I think that I think when people start to believe that they're better than each other, then I think the world is just not as good in a good a place, and the company's not in as good a place. So I really do believe that no job is beneath any of us is really something I try and live by every single day.
That's such good advice. And looking back, I mean, what would you say has been your greatest professional accomplishment so far?
It's funny. I'm one of those guys where I never my team will tell you, like, they say, Amit, you're never satisfied. I said, I'm always happy, but I'm never satisfied because I always think you can do more. I always think you can do better. I don't necessarily think I've got a top one thing. I think what inspires me is the team I work with every day, and being able to help people. If there's something they don't understand, or there's something I can do to support them, whether it's within this company or without. But I very much believe in paying it forward. I mean, even this morning there was someone who called, and she was introduced to me, and she's like looking for a job. So I'm going to talk to you about her. I'm going to introduce you to her, and she's got an MBA and she wants to become a brand manager. And she's like, what do you think about big companies versus small companies? And I think I think for all of us, it's really about trying to help each other.
Absolutely. And last but not least, right, you look back on your career and your life and you look at those tough times, tough business decisions, tough people decisions that you've had to make people. And you have to, really truly dig down deep and harness that tenacity to pull you up and forward. And on the flip side of it, when you want to show gratitude, when you're thankful for the life and the career and the businesses that you built, Amit, Pandhi, what is your North Star?
I think it's the people. I mean, it always goes back to the people, right? Like without the people, you have nothing, right? You'd have an empty facility. You wouldn't have the brilliance. You wouldn't have the passion. You wouldn't have the customers. I always, the North Star for me is always take care of the people. Always do the human thing, right? I think sometimes you get into these organizations and it's just treating everyone like a number, and I just don't do that, right? Like if we have problems or we have issues, I do one-on-ones with anybody and everyone, and I think that for me that's what drives me every day. Like I'm excited every Sunday night to go to work on Monday, and that's because I get to work with the people I get to work with, and I think if that ever stops being fun, then it's time to hang it up. But my North Star is just always the team. Always put them first, and they'll always put your customers first, and at the end of the day, then everything sort of comes together.
Well said, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think that you shared a lot. I think there's a lot of gold in what you discussed. I think there's so much insight, not just the CPG and the snacks category specifically, but talking about leadership, talking about how you build teams, your approach to leading and building and interviewing, which is critical, because that's what I want people to understand. Like what are senior level executives looking for? And I love that you're, nothing's beneath you, right? That is real, true leadership, and I appreciate you. Where could folks find you? Where could they connect with you? Where could they learn more?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much there all the time. I think that's a great place to connect. I'm not really on the other platforms. Just don't have the time to do
not
all
a
of them.
TikToker. I hate TikTok. I'm not. That's my daughter's world. She's a master of it. We'll leave it there.
I'm still a little more traditional.
Jeez, traditional.
Come find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to get a hold of me.
Good stuff, Amit. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you. Hang with me for a moment here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And thank you to everyone joining us today. I really hope that you found a ton of gold in this conversation. If you did, a like, a share, a comment, a review, and a rating goes a really long way. You could find more amazing episodes like this one at thepodcast.com. All our social media channels. Go out there and buy some Popchips. Help this business here. Take care of each other. Stay 6 feet apart. And catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search The Podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.